Morning, friends. Today we are entering into a new zone. We will discuss the concept of power and morality in the writings of Karl Marx, Max Weber, and Emile Durkheim. Now, so far as the concept of power is concerned, Karl Marx and Max Weber, they are the major theorists of power among the classical sociological thinkers. Whereas Emile Durkheim is regarded usually as a minor theorist of power as we understand this term today. On the other hand, in the case of morality, Emile Durkheim is the most important theorist, and Karl Marx and Max Weber are not even minor theorists of morality as we understand the term morality today. Rather, they are marginal to this concept. Now, what is the basic difference between the minor theorist and marginal theorist? The marginal theorists are usually outside the circle of the paradigmatic circle within which we are discussing a concept. In contrast, minor theorists are very much part of the circle which is discussing the notion within the paradigmatic boundary. Here, I am using the term paradigm in the sense T.S. Kuhn had developed it in his celebrated classic, The Structure of the Scientific Revolution. Now let us come to Karl Marx, and we are at the moment discussing the concept of power. Now, as you know, Emile Durkheim was indirectly discussing about the phenomenon called the power, but he did not use the term power in his writing. In the division of labor in society, when he is discussing with the two solidarities, mechanical and organic, he is discussing about the concept of reward and punishment. And he is saying that once a member of the mechanical solidarity goes against the community boundary provided by collective consciousness or collective representation or the sacred, the mechanical solidarity resorts to repressive penal laws. On the other hand, when a member of the organic solidarity crosses the boundary or hurts the community sentiment by insulting the sacred, the mechanical solidarity would have used the repressive penal law, but the organic solidarity usually punishes the person by using restitutive penal law. This was his position in the first edition of the Division of Labor in Society, published in 1893, if I remember the date correctly. But when he revised it in 1902, he was ready to concede that even in mechanical solidarity, there is possibility of restitutive penal law. This was Durkheimian notion of power of the community to reward or punish the member of the solidarity. Now, if we take, this is the Durkheimian notion of power, we have a different type of concept of society in the writings of Emile Durkheim, which is based on the concept of moral consensus. We will deal with the Durkheimian concept of moral consensus because there are many revisions of this concept of moral consensus from 1893 to 1917, just before his death. At the moment, we will deal with the concept of power in the writings of Karl Marx and Max Weber, and Durkheimian view will be represented by the later writings of Talcott Parsons. As you know, in the earlier writings, namely the structure of social action, Talcott Parsons was developing a theory of social action which was primarily influenced by his understanding of Max Weber, supplemented by the writings of Emile Durkheim and Wilfred Pareto. He also took into account some other theorists, but he ignored the writings of Karl Marx completely because, in the opinion of Talcott Parsons, Marx was at best a utopian philosopher or a marginal political economist, and he never changed his view about Marx until his death. But by the time he published The Social System in 1951, he was relying more and more on Emile Durkheim and less on Max Weber and Wilfred Pareto. Instead, he supplemented Emile Durkheim by the insights he gathered as a student of cybernetics. Therefore, we will regard Parsonian concept of power as a neo-Durkheimian concept of power. At the end of my lecture on power, let us see how we can understand the Marxist notion of power. As I had said in the last week's class, when I was dealing with the Marxist notion of base and superstructure, that compared with Durkheim, Marx had a comparatively sophisticated conception of society, which he saw as a more complex structure than the Durkheimian concepts of mechanical and organic solidarities. Whereas Das Kapital, published in 1867, seemed to be concerned with the ways in which individuals were the product of economic and social structures. The economic and philosophic manuscripts of 1844 were primarily concerned with human freedom and the realization of human powers. The 1844 manuscripts provides a significant contrast with Durkheim's The Division of Labor in Society. Here we have two concepts of power in the writings of Marx. One is his discussion of human powers when he is discussing the theory of alienation. Now let us see what is the Marxist view about alienation and how it is related with the concept of man and society. I have divided this lecture in alphabetical letters. Therefore, A, Marx saw religion as the projection of human powers onto an imaginary figure that we call God. Until here, Marx and Durkheim are not much different, because for Durkheim as well, God was primarily a collective representation called sacred, which he was using to understand religion in everyday life in so-called primitive and developed societies. He called the primitive society mechanical solidarity and developed society as organic solidarity. But when Marx develops his theory of alienation, there is a definite, shift in the writings of Karl Marx, which is in contrast to Emile Durkheim. Let us see B. Marxist theory of alienation is about the loss of human powers in society, that is, the way in which a particular type of social organization alienates human beings from the human world. See, underlying this theory of alienation is a particular philosophical anthropology. Now, what is philosophical anthropology? It is a discussion about the macro concepts in non-empirical ways of man, or rather the nature of man, the nature of human needs, the nature of division of labor, the concept of work, and the meaning of work and the functions of work. Therefore, many sociologists today think that a philosophical anthropology is a conception of human nature which underlies explanations of human social behavior. This I classified as D. Now point E. Over recent decades, philosophical anthropology has been redefined in terms of a theory of human needs. In other words, what the earlier sociologists called philosophical anthropology is understood by a new rubric called human needs. In other words, there is no difference between philosophical anthropology and a theory of human needs in the Marxist sociological writings. Now, Marx suggested that certain features of human nature had been constant. We had discussed this point when we were discussing the concept of homo faber, as the Marxist notion of man. What was homo faber? Man as a tool-making animal, or man as a laborer, or man as a worker. We are discussing, and so far we have said, Marx suggested that certain features of human nature has been constant, and therefore man remains a homo faber in case we are discussing the human species as a subject or object of study from the non-human species in philosophical sociology or anthropology. In continuation to point E, it should be noted that it is human nature to transform human life, and this transformation establishes the development popularly known as history. If we do not simply adjust to our environment as human species, but change it. Marx was obsessed with the human power to change its environment in all his writings, including his political pamphlet written by both Marx and Engels, known as the Communist Manifesto, where he said, philosophers have analyzed the world. Now the question is to change it. He is again, theorizing the same power human beings have got as a species. And he is saying that we human beings do not simply adjust to our environment, social, cultural, economic, political, or environmental, but change it. But we change our environment. But we change our environment in such a way that it then entails changing ourselves in order to adjust to it. This is a very sophisticated concept of power. And whether you are a Marxist or a non-Marxist, in case you read it objectively, in case you do not impose your own meanings, your own likes and dislikes, then as a student of Marxist notion of power, it will be very difficult for you to not love it. Even from my Buddhist point of view, it is a very fascinating concept of power, which is not in contrast to the concept of power we find in the writings of Buddhist masters. For example, when human beings build cities, urban cities, they have to change themselves in order to live in these cities. We change psychologically and develop new skills and abilities. Now let us come to G. The concept of a species being or human species in the 1844 manuscripts is that this constant process of transformation is a collective enterprise. Here, Marx is explicitly saying in categorical terms that there is a charismatic leader or Messiah or a prophet to lead normal human beings for such a big transformation of the environment. This is also something which the Buddha said, and the Buddha said 500 before the death of Jesus Christ. I will not say that Marx borrowed this concept of power from the Buddha or the Buddhist masters. But in the Indian case, it is interesting that some of the better educated Marxists have been attracted to the philosophy of the Buddha also. I will give two names. One is the name of Pandit Rahul Sankrityayan, who knew more than 18 languages of the world. He was a devout Buddhist, and when he visited Soviet Union, he was warmly welcomed by Joseph Stalin himself. The other person who was influenced by both Buddhism and Marxism in his early days, when he was championing the cause of untouchability in Indian society. I am talking about Baba Sahab B.R. Ambedkar. In 1920s at least, he was synthesizing his concept or his theory of society in a unique way. But in 1950s, he said categorically. In 1956, he formally renounced Hindu religion and converted with his enormous followers in 1956 in Buddhism. Now, when he converted to Buddhism, he became a Buddhist master, but he was neither a Buddhist associated with Asthavirvad or Heenyan, nor with the Mahayana. Rather, he developed his own concept of engaged Buddhism, where he took the salient features of Asthavirvad, which is referred to as Heenyan by the Mahayanis and the other analysts of Asthavirvad. But unlike the Asthavirvadi concept of individual liberation, he borrowed the concept of collective liberation from the Mahayana tradition. of Acharya Nagarjuna. Now, the Buddhist concept of collective emancipation resonates well with the Marxist concept of collective liberation in the third stage of communism, where there will be no family, no marriage, no private property, no estate. As we know, it has remained an utopia, and none of the communist systems or nation state has been able to eradicate the concept of family, the concept of marriage, even the concept of private property. Although they tried to legislate that there will be no communist society which will have a notion of private property as it is understood among the non-communist systems the world over, but they could not succeed. Anyway, let us come to point G again. The Marxist concept of human species in the 1844 manuscripts is that this constant process of transformation is a collective enterprise. Now, this collective enterprise is something in which we are all involved and in which we are all connected to each other. Now, here also we find a great similarity with Emile Durkheim when he discussing the concept of division of labor in society. Durkheim said that in organic solidarity, that is a society with division of labor, everybody is related with everybody and everybody is dependent on everybody. Now let us come to I, and here the contrast between Marx and Durkheim will be very, very obvious. In continuation to point H, alienation is a state or condition in which the environment we create takes on a real solidity. Solidity, solid, which can be easily observed, which can be easily seen, which can have, as Emile Durkheim said, coercive, restraining function. Alienation is a condition or a state not in the sense of, nation state or provincial state, but a state as in physics, the solid state, the liquid state, and the gaseous state. Therefore, instead of a state, I am using the term condition. Alienation is a condition in which the environment we create takes on a real solidity, that is institutional or a structural form, which can be easily seen as a social fact or which can have coercive function or standing effect function. Now, again, alienation is a condition in which the environment we create takes on real solidity, comes to seem unchangeable. Once we change our environment, we cannot change it again to the earlier state. For example, when you have chemically transformed the milk into the curd, you cannot, transform the curd into milk again. This is the meaning of unchangeable. When it takes on the sense of a second nature. In the writings of Marx himself, there is only this. Alienation is a state in which the environment we create takes on a real solidity, and this solidity comes to seem unchangeable. Now, Lukács, the German sociologist regarded as the founder of critical theory, he said that this change of environment as solid and unchangeable, it takes on the sense of a second nature. The earlier nature has been transformed by collective enterprise by human species, and now what we have is the second nature. It is similar to the Kantian concept of phenomena. The earlier concept of Marx, that is nature as itself, is called noumena in the writings of Immanuel Kant, who is supposed to be the philosophical source of the writings of Max Weber. Max Weber is regarded as a neo-Kantian philosopher, whereas Marx was influenced by Hegel. Now come to J. The system we create acts back on us to form and control us, and it alienates us from our own collective nature as beings who work together to transform our world and ourselves. K. Marx was concerned with the particular form of alienation brought about by capitalism in 1844 manuscripts. Until now, Marx was developing a general concept of human power, which is an essential part of human nature, human as a species being. Now Marx is coming to understand the concept of alienation In the capitalist mode of production, in the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844. And Marx introduces a new concept, that of estranged labor, ESTRANGED, estranged labor. And this I have termed point L. Marx said that classical political economy took private property as the starting point of explanation of economic behavior of man in Western Europe. Primarily, he is referring to the Scottish philosophers Adam Smith, David Hume, and their followers, Ricardo, Marshall, etc. Marx said that these political economists of Scotland, they presented private property as a type of natural condition of human history. Marx said it is an ideology and not scientific explanation of private property as a historically constructed phenomenon. M. To make his point more explicit, in addition to the concept of estranged labor, Marx is introducing a new concept of market. Not in economic and philosophic manuscript of 1844, but in the first volume of Capital, published in 1867. Marx argues that market labor itself becomes a commodity. A commodity is a thing bought and sold like any other object. Now, this is unprecedented in the history of academia, because none of the scholars before Karl Marx conceptualized market and labor in the market as a commodity. As you will see a little later, it led to the development of a complementary concept of commodity fetishism. And these two concepts, the theory of alienation and the theory of commodity fetishism, represent two notions of human power in man as a species. And the more the laborer produces, the cheaper his or her labor becomes. in Economic and Philosophical Manuscript of 1844 on page 107. Marx is writing, and I am quoting in direct narration. With the increasing value of the world of things proceeds in direct proportion to the devaluation of the world of men. I will read it again. With the increasing value of the world of things proceeds in direct proportion to the devaluation of the world of men. And then point O. The worker is alienated from his or her product, and it is impossible to distinguish the work done by him or her from the work of anybody else. He is talking about the complicated division of labor in modern factory. The more I, as a worker, produce, the less control, the less power I have. This is again a new concept which Marx developed. It is his original observation of work in the modern factory and the condition of the worker. I am quoting from page 108 from the Economic and Philosophical Manuscript of 1844. The alienation of the worker in his product means not only that his labor becomes an object, an external existence, but that it exists outside him independently as something alien to him, and that it becomes a power on its own, confronting him. I am reading it again, then I will continue, because this is a long paragraph. Not long in the sense of popular novels, but long in the sense as theory formulation. The alienation of the worker in his product means not only that his labor becomes an object, an external existence, but that it exists outside him independently as something alien to him, and that it becomes a power on its own, confronting him. And then he continues, it means that the life which he had conferred on the object confronts him. It means that the life which he has conferred on the object confronts him as something hostile and alien. Thank you, friends. We have ended a very important discussion. Let us meet to continue this Marxist concept of power.